Welcome to the Lubbock or Leave It podcast, a recruiting-specific podcast on RedRiverSports.com, made possible by our sponsor, Carnley Properties. You guys know Clayton Carnley from the board, but him, his mother, their staff, they run they run Carnley Properties out of the Austin metro area. So any of your real estate needs, we're going to include his information here. But a big decision when you buy a house, you buy land, you do any of that. You need somebody like Clayton and his team on your side with all their experience. So what I've heard is whether it's in the actual metroplex, in a neighborhood or even ranch land and all sorts of stuff. They've got you covered in that Austin metro area. So we'll get their information posted down here, but big thanks to Clayton and his team for sponsoring the recruiting pod here on Red River Sports. But Ben, I know that you're doing pretty good, man. I mean, the Suns are up 2-0. We're going to get this in before Game 3. How's everything else going, man?
It's going well, just like Texas Tech recruiting, because last time we did this, they had 0 guys on the commitment list, and now they have 4. And so pretty big week for the Red Raiders, and, another big group of visitors this weekend, which we'll talk about. And I know both you and I certainly expect, another few additions, coming up in the next few weeks, most likely, just based on the success they've already had. So, all good to hear.
Yeah, like you said, we'll touch on that in a minute, but let's focus on really what started last Thursday. And tonight is Thursday night, so we've had a full week, and we've done this podcast probably 6-7 episodes in, and we've always talked about who will be the first commit, or when are the coaches going to gain that momentum. And I feel like we didn't nail it, but we said maybe like the end of June, or at least a couple of weeks after some of these official visits. And I think you're starting to see that. So Hut Graham, I think we talked about him a little bit last time. I think at the end of the pod, he had actually announced that he was going to make a big, announcement on social media. So we saw what was happening there. But I mean, again, I'm a big fan of the coaches evaluating early and going after their guys. And you and I got to see him. The thing I said last time was just athleticism. I know that's easy to say, but I mean, he was the best player on the field, and that included Baron Morton that night. I mean, he did it all on offense and defense. And I know they had the better team, but he's done that for 2 solid years as a varsity starter at quarterback, and now he's going to come play defensive back. And the main question I asked him is it fair to say that playing quarterback helps you transition over to safety and DB, because oftentimes they're calling alignments and they're telling guys where to be on the field.
Yeah, and he reminds me of a classic like Gary Patterson. I know, like, he just takes these athletes and puts them somewhere on defense, and then they go and make all Big 12 teams. And so, yeah, absolutely, the athleticism is there. I think Hutt, once he got the offer from Tech, I think he wanted to be a Red Raider. I think he made that pretty clear with the scheduling official visit 5 days after just being on campus, and then, making that commitment. And, he told me, with the offer interview, that once he makes his decision, it's over. He's 110%. Right. I know most recruits say that, but, maybe some of them mean it more than others. And I think, Hutt is locked in, and great pickup to start the class, athletic. And that's exactly, the type of recruit you want leading the charge here.
So that was a Thursday. A couple days later, they land the big offensive lineman from Centennial, Colorado, Caden Weatherby. That was a young man that I had gotten in touch with as official visits were, at least becoming a reality. You knew the dead period was ending. And surprisingly enough, out of all the dozens of kids I texted with or talked with, he said, well, I'm actually focused on Texas Tech and Kansas State. And he just described that they were showing the most interest, and he felt like a priority. Offers from Michigan State. So, definitely a sought after recruit. And, again, I don't know any history about Texas Tech recruiting the state of Colorado, but I would imagine it's, few and far between. So to see Caden, come take his official visit, really like what he had to see, and him and his parents, felt very comfortable with him attending college at Tech. So I think it's a great way to start your offensive line class. A lot of the focus is on recruiting Texas, and 3 out of the 4 commits are from Texas. But at 6'6", 280, that's what you want in your offensive lineman, and hopefully Coach Farmer and the strength and conditioning coaches can get him in the door and get him developed.
Yeah, he had really good things to say about Matt Wells, Steve Farmer, and then even his host, Caleb Rogers, for the visit, just kind of glowing about all of them. And then just the opportunity he had at Tech. This isn't something fans want to hear, but he mentioned to me how Tech has, fewer scholarship linemen compared to some of these other schools. And so he just, sees that opportunity to come in and make an impact. And I think that helped Texas Tech's chances. With Weatherby. And so it's funny. So I was just up, at Centennial, Colorado. I was, 5 miles from where he plays last weekend, my first time in Colorado. And then he was in Lubbock. So it's kind of, it's funny. We always like to go see these recruits, but this time it ended up being flipped.
First time, you got to go back, man. You got to go back and go to the mountains. It's a beautiful place. So next.
I was going to say Red Raiders sports ski trip this fall.
I told you to text the group. I told you to put it on level. We need Carnley Properties needs to fly us to Denver. I mean, this is what we're talking about here. Anyway, but a little closer to home in Tyler, Texas, the coaches got a running back commitment from Bryson Donald. Again, Donovan, that's his son. DeAndre Smith, the running backs coach, he goes through, let's call it 4 or 5 offers, some obvious offers, some really talented backs around the state for 2022 in Texas. And even more so at Tyler Legacy, Bryson's teammate is a 4-star, Rivals 250 prospect. So to me, we've seen him in action. I've seen the frame. I'm a believer. He's right there at tick under 200 pounds. And I think he's going to continue to develop that frame, just still very, very productive. And I think that's just unique when you think about, him sharing a backfield with Jermarion Miller. But your thoughts on Bryson Donald?
Yeah, and I wrote an article today just looking at running back recruiting history the last several years, and you mentioned DeAndre Smith and the job that they've done and just how deep and talented Tech's backfield is right now. And then you think of adding him, Donald next year, and none of the guys you have are seniors. They can all still return. So it's just kind of crazy to think about them, numbers wise. But yeah, Donald's is one of these, mid 3-star Texas high school recruits that, Tech needs with multiple Power 5 offers that you want to see Tech stack. And that's how you kind of start competing with the TCUs and the Baylors of the world in recruiting.
I would argue that, and not to be like an old timer here, but I would argue that if you look at the top 25, there will be some exceptions, but out of that top 25 at the end of the college football season, they all have a dude at running back, or they have a system where they're, running the ball on offense. And so, that's where you like to see that recruiting process and, what the room looks like maybe compared to what they inherited. So yeah, that was definitely a good article. But yeah, no, I think again, I know I mentioned that he has the teammate that's being recruited, but Bryson Donald had 20 plus offers, several Power 5 options. He took the official visit to Texas Tech in Colorado. And I just think all along, he probably just struck a chord with the Tech coaches. And, he could have gone and visited Arkansas, other Power 5 programs. And, he decided he was comfortable making his commitment. So great job by the coaches there. I think the last one, I'd love to get your opinion, Ben. I've spent a lot of time talking about him this week, writing about him. And I know you had a chance to talk to him recently, but A-Leaf Taylor, wide receiver Tyler King. I guess my main question is in this year of COVID, 15-month dead period, all that, there are going to be guys like Tyler King that are just, 5.5 3-star, but, I'm not sure that without a 5-game season or without this long dead period that he may not have the same 20 offers we're talking about with Bryson Donald.
Yeah, you really like the traits with Tyler King, just the speed, the reported, 4.28, which makes the headlines, but he's not even like he told me in the interview we did, he's always been, kind of a smaller dude, compared himself to like Miles Price. He's 5'11". That's not even, like a short, like you think of like a, a 5'8" guy. No, 5'11". I mean, that guy, that's Kiki QT size, I believe. So he,
yeah.
he can probably move around, do some different things. And I just like his fit with Sonny Cumbie's offense, going to where Cumbie's more multiple. And, you could see, formations with both King and Price on the field, for example, whereas, in the past couple of years with Yost, you'd only have one of those guys on the field. I just like, I just like having more speed on the field in general. So that's something that intrigues me about King. And he camped with Texas, he camped with A&M, and those schools are certainly showing interest. We'll see if they come in with an offer or not, but good to get him on the commitment list. And now you just got to sign him. You got to hold on there.
Yeah, I mean, so I had messaged I was trying to get Rose Simon on the pod tonight. We'll maybe do a combo. I know we're going to have Caden Weatherby next week to go in a little bit more detail about his visit, recruitment, commitment, all that good stuff. But Rose Simon is he's a trainer. He works with a lot of recruits, and he runs the Fast 7-on-7 organization. And I mean, he even trains pro players, all that jazz, right? And so he had specifically brought Tyler King into that organization just because of his track times and just him, being a standout in that Houston area. So I'm really interested to get his perspective. So we'll try to get that either up on the website or here on the podcast soon. But again, there's certain things that you can or cannot do with like hard work and determination. Speed's not one of them. And having these guys in the offense, I think, is important. And, to me, like I said off the top, when I asked you the question, I think when we look back on this class and how all this developed or, how it happened with the pandemic, there's a lot of these kids that are flying under the radar right now. And for the coaches to be really, the other feedback that I was going to mention is actually from his coaches at A-League Taylor. The fact that Tech was in there first and the fact that they were loving him up and recruiting him and doing all this, I think it says a lot because, yes, he is the kid I was talking about last week where Texas said, give us 30 days and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess that's nicer than saying, hey, we don't want to recruit you, kid. But, it's game. It sounded like game to me. But, again, our job is just to listen and take notes. It's not to provide our opinions. And so, we're here talking and I shared that. But, like you said, if they can hold on to him, I do think there are going to be other offers that come in. I mean, flat out, because there's a whole season left and, knock on wood, everything stays great with the pandemic or COVID or whatever, we're going to have more of a sample size. And I really think he's going to have a tremendous senior season.
I thought it was interesting. He told me, I asked him about the coaches, and he's like, yeah, I talked to Luke Wells. Yeah, I talked to Joel Filani, but I talked to grad assistant BJ Johnson every day. That's like his guy. So you don't really see that. You don't really see that too often, but I think BJ Johnson's like a younger, he played at, I want to say Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern, just 5 years ago. So he's, one of these younger GAs who can relate to the recruits. And I think, I've seen him on social media be active. So, just another, I guess, part of the recruiting process you don't really think about.
No doubt. All right. Well, in the sake of time, the only other few that I think we want to mention, right, the coaches continue to prioritize some 2023 guys in conjunction with some of these official visits. So I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention guys like Avion Carter and Caleb James. I know James is the big 2023 defensive end or rush end out of Nolan Catholic. You and I have seen him multiple times at camps. He did add the Oklahoma offer. We'll see. I'm supposed to talk with him soon. But Avion Carter, again, I mean, this is the whole idea of West Texas, and he really is a premier prospect. LSU, Oklahoma, you name it. I think he has the offer right now without looking at his offer list. So, again, just wanted to mention those. Out of the rest of the visitors from last week, we have not talked with Derek Brown. We slightly talked with Jaden Peoples, but now he's going to visit Baylor. So, his recruitment seems to be taking a left and a right and a U-turn, here and there. But I do think the coaches getting Brown back on campus is a very positive sign. Brown's reportedly headed to Baylor this weekend as well. So I don't know, any thoughts on those before we move on to the visitors from this weekend?
Yeah, I think Brown has to be one of these top targets for Tech. He already was, but even more so now with Curly Thomas committed to Cal. I just think they're two different players, but just having that rush end type And you've mentioned to me, yes, Texas and Oklahoma have offered Derek Brown, but is he number one on their boards? I mean, we don't know that. Is it possible that he's planning to make a decision next week or in a couple weeks? What if Texas says no? I mean, he could end up a Red Raider, and so we'll see. But yeah, he's going to be at Baylor this weekend, and hopefully we'll get to catch up with him after that.
Okay, so let's look at this weekend. Before we do that, 4 commits, 1 week, national ranking of 71 in the nation for those who care. But to me, a 5.63 star and 3 5.5s, you could do a lot worse than that. So good start for the Tech coaches after a solid 3 weeks of visits. But this weekend, I think this is one we've been waiting for, and we could probably spend a lot of time here. But as we just talked about Tyler King, one of the major visitors this weekend is Major Everhart out of Amarillo as well, teammates with Avion Carter. I just think this is one of the biggest visits of the cycle, Ben. If you look at this month, this is the guy that they've targeted. This is the guy that they offered, early. This is the guy they've been putting a lot of attention towards. But this is also a kid who is blowing up. And I only mentioned the Tyler King thing because he was going after him on social media and saying, hey, when are you coming with me, Major? So again, very similar makeup. Maybe Major's a little bit bigger, but standout track star and a lot of speed. So Ben, I don't know. I mentioned Major. Anything else you want to mention there? Any other visitors you want to highlight?
Yeah, just on Major, I think it makes a lot of sense to take 2 slot guys because you have McLean Mannix and Kalen Geiger. Both are seniors. They both won't be here next year. And so, you would like to replace them with 2, and then you would still have a nice group of 4 there to play the slot. Major, I think, like you mentioned, he's blowing up. I think I heard that there were a couple of blue bloods in particular that are sniffing around. He's visited Baylor, he's visited TCU, so that's kind of the competition there.
What are we thinking, Blue Bloods? Are we saying SEC, Big 12? What are we thinking? I'm just curious. I'm not verified on Twitter. You have to tell me. I'm not verified.
I just all of it, just programs that have won national championships, and things like that in recent history.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. Last thing I'll say on Major is, all that I said is true. Coaches have made him a priority, so you gotta think that they're gonna throw the kitchen sink at this weekend. I mean, this is a big weekend, and you can't emphasize that enough. But Speaking of big, you've got a Rivals 250 athlete in Marion Horn coming in, along with his teammate, wide receiver Robert Spears Jennings, who, was, you knew Ole Miss was a heavy competitor, but then OU offered after he camped there as a defensive back. So it kind of throws a wrinkle into, maybe what you perceived his recruitment as. But what I'd like to do is start with Marion Horn, and give us a little more info on him, Ben.
Yeah, he was a guy who I talked to a couple months back, and at the time he told me running back. That's what Tech was recruiting him as. But I followed up, and now he kind of told me both sides of the ball. So this could be a guy that they view as a defensive back. He's listed as an athlete, and I think he would be kind of a best available player. And so you bring him in with his teammate Robert Spears Jennings, and hopefully you can strike some magic there. But he visited Baylor last weekend and Tech this week. I believe those are his only 2 official visits, which is interesting considering his status and high ranking.
You said Baylor, right? He visited Baylor last week?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was seeing on this. But interestingly enough, the last update is from like March. And so I know he's been responsive in text, but this is a guy, that strikes me as low key. But when you look at the offer list, I mean, to me, it's pretty impressive, Ben. I mean, from a region standpoint and a conference standpoint, Arkansas, Baylor, that we touched on, Iowa State, Kansas, Michigan State, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Oregon, Texas, Texas Tech, and USC. I mean, that's a little bit of everything, right? I mean, so this young man's clearly talented. So for him to, want to take that official visit and come see Texas Tech, I think it speaks volumes about his, relationship with the coaches. But if he's labeled as an athlete, I know he plays both now. So, to me, that'll just be interesting. I mean, I'm all about adding as much talent as possible, whether that be running back or defensive back. And, really eager to talk to this young man. We've really only texted, it has been my experience, but hopefully we'll be able to talk to him after the visit this weekend.
And I think it's the same deal with Spears Jennings. You mentioned Oklahoma offered as a defensive back. I think Tech's offer initially was maybe as a receiver, but now they be looking at him as a defensive back also? I mean, these are valid questions. I think if OU offers you as a DB, I think that's certainly something to think about with him. And then another Oklahoma, this one is a defensive back, Jocelyn Malaska, who camped with Tech 2 weeks ago, I want to say, ran, won the fastest DB competition, ran a 4.4 or something. And he didn't pick up an offer yet, but I certainly expect him to get one from Tech. He did get one from Vanderbilt last week.
I see Vandy, SMU, Kansas, and several others right here. I mean, 9 total offers. So, absolutely trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and the 2 most recent are SMU and Vanderbilt. So he's been camping with a lot of these programs, been running really fast 40s. And so Tech saw that and they decided to bring him back on an official. So he's a guy that we will certainly talk with. And I think he's excited about the Red Raiders because as soon as that official visit was planned, he hit me up and was like, hey, man, I'm taking this official visit, just like,
right.
He seemed pretty excited about it. So you always like to see that.
Well, really, the last guy to mention now that you got ahead of Malaska. Hopefully we said that right. Sheridan Wilson, this guy we've talked to for a long time. Jack Tucker, offensive tackle signee from Argyle. These guys went undefeated, I believe, won the 4A state title. And it's interesting because Sheridan has an older brother, Preston, that plays at Oklahoma State. I don't know exactly which visits he's taken so far, but Sheridan just always has great things to say about Tech. He has great things to say about, his potential visits, all that. And, I feel like this week, I'm not going to overstate it. I don't want to do that. I feel like this weekend, this group of kids that are coming in from a talent standpoint, definitely, impressive. But these are guys I feel like they purposely scheduled for the end of the month because they want to roll out the red carpet for these guys. These are some of their top targets. They feel like they can get commitments from these kids. And so for me, the last thing that we could round out on, Ben, is, looking back at last weekend, we talked about Derek Brown. There's still a long way to go there, I feel. Baylor visit this weekend, Tennessee offer this week. Jalen Peoples, who knows, right? He's going to Baylor this week. Maybe not a Texas Tech commit or actual target. But this weekend, Major Everhart, Marion Horn, we talked about Rivals 250. You're going to roll the red carpet out for that guy. Sheridan Wilson, teammate of Jack, things trending in the right direction. For everything that's happened with Robert Spears Jennings, the draw to Oklahoma, Ole Miss, all that, the coaches have been in it. They have a shot at this, right? And then the same thing with Jocelyn Malaska. You could argue that Texas' best offer. You can argue that they have the most momentum. So, I'm seeing at least 2 more commitments out of this weekend. I don't know about you.
Yeah, that'd be some good news for sure. Sheridan Wilson, he visited TCU last week and then Washington State earlier this week, I believe, for a midweek. And then Tech, and I think he's a guy wanting to make a decision. I believe he told me initially it was in the spring, then we kind of found out visits would be allowed, so he wanted to take a few. But I think he's one of these guys that wants to make a decision, fairly quickly here, probably in early June or July, or something like that.
Okay. Well, all in all, we've been waiting for this month for a long time, Ben. Looking back, or not looking back, we're not done yet. We've got one more week, but kind of looking back on what's transpired and kind of this thread that we're referring to here. Any other guys you want to call out? Anything else? Any thoughts you have here about finally getting kids on campus?
Yeah, one more, Hal Presley. I think we wanted to talk about. He is a transfer. He was a class of 2021, so just signed back in December. Signed with Auburn. He was a longtime Baylor commit from Mansfield Summit, decommitted from Baylor, committed to Auburn and signed. And this is Jacoby Jackson's teammate and the guy that we saw play and we talked to. And at the time, Tech was showing interest. I don't believe they ever offered, but now they are definitely interested. And he's set to be on campus starting tomorrow, I believe. And so, 6'3", 190. I believe the coaches were looking, maybe a best available player, type of, because there's a handful of spots left. And so Presley, almost a 4-star kid with a 5.7 rivals ranking just last year. So what are your thoughts on Mr. Hal Presley?
I mean, you and I got to go and watch that game, and I think we even had some sort of a reaction on the board, or we were doing some sort of a Zoom back then. And I mean, he had 3 touchdowns that game. When they needed something on offense, they threw it up to Hal. So I don't know. One thing he said is he didn't have an offer. I really, don't want to say you're wrong, but on his profile, it does list an offer. And I feel like I remember the coaches, well, no, it doesn't. I take that back. So he visited, but no offer.
Right.
So that was kind of like that thing where we were there to see Jacoby, but we were still talking to him at the time. And during the season, the coaches were still talking with him. But anyway, I mean, 6'3", 190, I think the kid can play receiver. And if you're looking to add depth, this is unique. I mean, I know you said he's a 2021 class, but for those watching this that aren't crystal clear, he signed just like anyone else in Texas Tech's 2021 class, but just either never moved to Auburn or just decided, hey, I don't think I really want to go there anymore. And so, he's going to take this official visit. He's got plenty of time until the summer 2 or the fall semester starts. So could be additional visits, but we're trying to get in touch with him and figure out exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I think he was a guy, he visited the big end of January, weekend. It was so long ago, but that was the weekend Jeron Bradley, I think, actually committed. And if you remember, they were only going to take 1 receiver. And so that's why I think he was going to be an offer, but then Bradley committed, and that was kind of that. But yeah, just, one of these, a Texas top 100 kid, you can't turn that down.
Yeah, number 55 in the state. Absolutely. For a very competitive and quality team at Mansfield Summit. So, definitely you like the tie that Jacoby has there. And then, of course, if we're talking about, what decisions he made or what timeline that was certainly, before the coaches didn't have Jalen Polk anymore. So now things change, and maybe he is an offer, and they don't want to take 1 wide receiver in Jeron Bradley. So anyway, we'll monitor all that. We'll see what happens. I guess, Ben, I forgot all about that. We got to talking, but in addition to Hal Presley, an SEC signee and potential addition at wide receiver, there's going to be kids that are currently committed to other Big 12 programs in town again. And so, this is essentially a sponsored and free podcast for most folks. I encourage you to sign up at Red Raider Sports. We're running some promos now. Ben and I try to stay in front and on top of everything. I think we do a pretty good job of that. But in addition, as the season, gets closer, we've got guys on the team beat, guys in Lubbock at press conferences, and of course, Level and Aaron, who have done this for a number of years. So definitely check us out over there. As these kids get in town and the visits are confirmed, we'll include all those details on the website. But, I guess, Ben, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah. And, just there's also going to be 2023 offensive linemen. I've heard a couple of big names coming in. So just, like you mentioned, stay tuned. Join us over at Red Raider Sports. We'll be on top of all the latest and greatest recruiting news.
Yeah, in fact, I would say the guy that's getting a lot of these kids on campus is Jeron Hodges. Even he has joined Red Raider Sports and hosted a whole Q&A on our site. So again, shout out to Coach Hodges. And really, I mean, look this past week, Ben. I mean, we're here talking about commitments, and who knows what'll happen, by the time we reconnect next week. But again, big thanks to Carnley Properties, Clayton Carnley and his team. Give them a shout in the Austin metro area for any real estate needs. Ben, good luck to your Spurs tonight. I will get out of here. Your Spurs? Oh, your Suns. All right. Sorry. I didn't have a smooth landing there. Suns, whatever. They got lucky in game 2. We all know it. Let's hope they win game 3 on the road.
We will. Chris Paul's back.
Yeah, that's true. They probably will demolish them. All right, guys. It's the Lubbock or Leave It podcast. We'll see you next week.